An old man wandered the streets with his battered camera, quietly capturing moments of kindness the world had long forgotten. Suddenly he saw an elderly woman collapse in the middle of the road from a heart attack. He rushed to her side, gently lifting her and calling for help. But what he didn't know was that just minutes later an accident would uncover all the secrets he had kept hidden. Before we dive in this story, let us know where you watching from. We love to hear your thought. The morning sun filtered through the narrow streets of Brooklyn's Brownsville neighborhood, casting long shadows across cracked sidewalks and weathered brick buildings. Harold Davis walked slowly, his worn leather boots making soft sounds against the pavement. In his hands he cradled his most precious possession, a black Nikon FM2 camera, its leather strap faded from decades of use. Harold was 62 years old, with silver-streaked hair and deep-set eyes that had witnessed both the beauty and hardship of life in these streets. His dark skin bore the lines of countless smiles, and his movements carried the gentle patience of someone who had learned to see the world differently than most. He paused at the corner of Pitkin Avenue, watching as Mrs. Ava, the elderly owner of the corner grocery, struggled with two heavy bags. A teenage boy in a worn jacket noticed her struggle and immediately rushed over, taking the bags from her arms with a respectful nod. Harold's face softened into a smile. He raised his camera and captured the moment. The boy's careful grip on the bags, the gratitude in Mrs. Ava's eyes, the morning light touching both their faces. "Excuse me," Harold called out softly, approaching them. "That was a beautiful thing you just did, young man. Would you mind if I took a photo with both of you?" The boy looked surprised but nodded. Harold positioned them together, Mrs. Ava's hand on the boy's shoulder, both smiling genuinely. Click. Another moment preserved. Another reminder the world still has light, Harold whispered to himself as he checked the shot. This was Harold's ritual, his quiet mission. For 15 years since his wife Margaret had passed away, he had walked these streets documenting acts of kindness. Not the grand gestures that made the news, but the small everyday moments of human goodness that most people never noticed. A neighbor sharing leftover dinner with a struggling family. Children helping an elderly man cross the busy intersection. A ray of sunshine breaking through a window to illuminate a mother reading to her child. Harold never posted these photos online. He didn't have social media accounts, didn't seek recognition or praise. Instead, he carefully printed each photograph at the old photo shop on Rockaway Avenue and stored them in a wooden box his father had made him years ago. The box sat on his dresser at home, filled with hundreds of memories, proof that kindness still existed in a world that often felt cold and indifferent. That's when he saw her. An elderly woman, perhaps in her late 70s, suddenly clutched her chest near the entrance of a small bakery. Her face contorted in pain, and before Harold could react, she collapsed onto the sidewalk. Her purse scattered across the concrete, its contents spilling everywhere. Harold didn't hesitate. He dropped to his knees beside her, his camera swinging on its strap. Years ago Margaret had insisted they both take a CPR course at the community center. "You never know when you might save a life," she had said. He had never imagined he would actually need to use it. Ma'am, can you hear me?" Harold gently tilted her head back, checking for breathing. Nothing. Her lips were already turning pale. His hands, which moments ago had been tenderly operating his camera, now pressed firmly against her chest. 1, 2, 3, he counted in his mind, maintaining the rhythm he'd learned. 30 compressions, then 2 rescue breaths. His own heart pounded wildly, but his movements remained steady and controlled. "Someone call 911, he shouted to the gathering crowd. A young woman was already on her phone, her voice urgent as she gave the address to the operator. Harold continued the compressions, his arms burning with effort. "Come on," he whispered between counts. "Stay with us, please stay with us." After what felt like an eternity but was probably only 2 minutes, the woman suddenly gasped. Her eyes fluttered open, confused and frightened but alive. Harold supported her head gently, relief flooding through him. "You're okay," he said softly, his voice thick with emotion. "Help is coming. Just breathe." Nice and slow, the wail of sirens grew closer. Paramedics rushed over with their equipment, taking over with professional efficiency. As they worked, one of them looked at Harold with respect. "Sir, you saved her life, that was textbook CPR." Harold simply nodded, too overwhelmed to speak. He stepped back to give them room, his hands trembling now from the adrenaline. As the paramedics prepared to load the woman onto the stretcher, she reached out and grabbed Harold's hand. Her grip was weak but determined. Her eyes, now more focused, locked onto his with profound gratitude. "You've just saved an old woman's last heartbeat," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the commotion. Harold squeezed her hand gently, his eyes glistening. He managed a small smile. "You've got many more heartbeats ahead of you, ma'am." As they lifted her into the ambulance, Harold remembered his camera. With slightly shaking hands, he raised it and quickly captured one photo, the late afternoon light falling across her face as the paramedics worked, her hand still reaching toward him, the golden hour illuminating a moment of life, rescued from the edge of darkness. The ambulance doors closed and the vehicle sped away, its sirens fading into the distance. The crowd dispersed, people returning to their daily routines. Harold stood there for a moment longer, his camera hanging around his neck, his heart still racing. He looked down at his hands, the same hands that captured beauty were also capable of preserving life itself. Margaret would have been proud. As he turned to walk home, his feet already aching from the long day, Harold felt a deep sense of peace. This was why he walked these streets. This was why he believed in documenting kindness. Because sometimes, the lens through which we view the world becomes the lens through which we live in it. The evening air had turned crisp as Harold made his way toward the subway station. His body felt heavy with exhaustion, but his spirit was light. He replayed the moment in his mind, the woman's eyes opening, her hand reaching for his, the profound connection between two strangers bound by a single moment of crisis. He was so lost in thought that he almost didn't hear it, a small desperate mewing sound coming from between two parked cars. Harold stopped and listened. There it was again, weaker this time. He bent down, peering into the shadows beneath an old sedan. A tiny kitten, no more than a few weeks old, was trapped between the car's rear tire and the curb. Its orange fur was matted and dirty, and one of its paws appeared to be stuck. "Oh, little one," Harold murmured, getting down on his hands and knees. The kitten cried out again, its yellow eyes wide with fear. Harold carefully assessed the situation. The kitten had somehow wedged itself into a narrow gap, and every time it struggled, it seemed to get more tangled. He would need to approach from the street side to free it safely. He stood up, checking the traffic. The street was relatively quiet, just a few cars passing by every minute or so. Harold took a deep breath and stepped into the street, moving around to the back of the sedan. He knelt down again, reaching carefully toward the frightened kitten. "It's okay, baby. I've got you," he said softly, his fingers finally grasping the small trembling body. He heard the engine roar before he saw it, a delivery truck, speeding around the corner much too fast for a residential street. Harold's head snapped up, his eyes widening. He tried to pull back, but his arthritic knee locked, sending a sharp pain through his leg. Time seemed to slow down. Harold clutched the kitten to his chest protectively, trying to pivot his body away. The truck's brakes screamed. The driver's face, frozen in horror, appeared in the windshield. Then impact. Harold felt himself lifted off the ground, his body spinning through the air. His camera flew from around his neck, tumbling end over end. He hit the pavement hard, the wind knocked from his lungs. Pain exploded through his left side, his ribs, his shoulder, his hip. The world tilted and blurred. Through the haze he felt the kitten still moving in his arms. He had protected it. That thought brought him a strange comfort, even as darkness crept in at the edges of his vision. People were running toward him, their voices distant and muffled. Someone was calling 911 again. The truck driver, a young man with tears streaming down his face, was saying something, apologies, explanations about the brakes, but Harold couldn't focus on the words. His eyes searched frantically for his camera. Where was it? He tried to move, to look around, but his body wouldn't cooperate. Everything hurt. Everything was spinning. "Sir, don't move, please don't try to move," someone said, a hand pressing gently on his shoulder. The sirens came again, the same urgent wail that had carried away the woman he'd saved just hours earlier. The irony wasn't lost on him. Life had a strange way of coming full circle. When Harold opened his eyes, he was staring at a white ceiling. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead. The smell of antiseptic filled his nostrils. Hospital. He was in a hospital. He tried to sit up, but pain shot through his torso, forcing him back down with a groan. "Easy, Mr. Davis, you need to rest." A nurse appeared beside him, her face kind but firm. Her name tag read Linda. My camera," Harold managed to croak out, his throat dry and raw. "Did anyone find my camera?" "Old one, black leather." Nurse Linda's expression softened with sympathy. "I'm sorry, sir, there was no camera with your belongings when they brought you in. Just your wallet and keys." Harold closed his eyes, a different kind of pain washing over him. That camera had been with him for 32 years. Margaret had given it to him for their 30th anniversary, just months before the cancer took her. Every photograph in his wooden box at home had been taken with that camera. It wasn't just a piece of equipment, it was his companion, his purpose, his way of staying connected to Margaret's memory and the goodness she had always believed existed in people. "That camera," he whispered, his voice breaking. "That's where my stories live." Nurse Linda squeezed his hand gently, but had no words of comfort to offer. The door to his room opened, and a doctor entered, followed by an elderly woman in a wheelchair. Harold blinked, trying to focus through the pain medication. The woman looked familiar. "Mr. Davis," the doctor said, his voice warm with emotion. "I'm Dr. Alan Miller. And this is my mother, Eleanor Miller." Recognition hit Harold like a wave. The woman from the bakery, the woman whose life he had saved. Eleanor Miller's eyes filled with tears as she looked at him. Her son wheeled her closer to the bed, and she reached out with a trembling hand. "You," she said softly. "You're the man who saved me this afternoon." Dr. Alan Miller's voice was thick with emotion. "Mr. Davis, when the paramedics told us what you did for my mother, I couldn't believe it. And now you're here, hurt, in the same hospital." He paused, clearly struggling to maintain his composure. "I owe you my mother's life. Anything you need, anything at all, please just say it." Harold looked at this man, this doctor who probably saved lives every day, and saw the gratitude of a son who had been given more time with his mother. He understood that feeling. He would have given anything for more time with Margaret. "I don't need much, doctor," Harold said quietly, his voice hoarse. "Just my camera. That's where my stories live. Without it, I'm just an old man walking empty streets." Eleanor Miller squeezed his hand, her own eyes glistening with tears. "That camera may be lost, but your kindness is already framed in my heart, Mr. Davis. What you did for me today. I'll carry that with me for whatever time I have left." Harold managed a weak smile, though inside, his heart ached for the lost camera, and for all the future moments of kindness he wouldn't be able to capture. Dr. Miller made a note in his phone. "I'll make some calls. If that camera can be found, I'll find it for you." But even as the doctor spoke with confidence, Harold saw the truth in Nurse Linda's sympathetic eyes. In a city like New York, lost things rarely came back. His camera, his precious link to Margaret and to his mission of documenting goodness, was gone. As Dr. Miller and Eleanor left to let him rest, Harold stared at the ceiling again. His body was broken, healing slowly in this sterile room, but it was the absence of the weight around his neck, the familiar presence of his camera, that hurt most of all. For the first time in 15 years, he had no way to capture the light. 3 days after Harold's accident, Jake Torres walked through the streets of Brownsville with his camera gimbal, recording his latest content piece. At 26, Jake had built a modest YouTube following of about 80,000 subscribers through his series NYC Hidden Stories, videos exploring forgotten corners of the city, abandoned buildings, and overlooked neighborhoods. "What's up, guys? Jake here," he said to his camera as he walked. "Today we're exploring Brownsville, one of Brooklyn's most historic neighborhoods. People drive past these streets every day without really seeing them, you know. But every corner has a story, every alley has history." Jake was everything Harold was not: young, tech-savvy, always connected to his phone and social media. But beneath the modern vlogger exterior, he shared something fundamental with the older man, a belief that stories mattered, that ordinary people deserved to be seen. He turned down a narrow side street where the accident had occurred, drawn by the interesting graffiti art on the walls. As he panned his camera along the murals, something caught his eye, a glint of black partially hidden in a pile of discarded items beside a dumpster. Jake approached and knelt down. His breath caught. It was a camera, old, professional, clearly well loved despite its current battered state. The leather was scratched, and one corner of the body was dented, but when Jake carefully picked it up, it felt solid in his hands. "Yo, check this out," he said to his camera, holding up the Nikon. "Someone's vintage camera just abandoned here. This is like actual film photography equipment. You don't see these anymore." He turned it over in his hands, examining it more carefully. The lens was cracked but still attached. More importantly, there was a memory card slot. Someone had modified this old film camera to work with digital cards. Jake's curiosity piqued. He had a card reader in his backpack for transferring his own footage. Back at his small apartment in Bushwick, an hour later, Jake connected the camera's memory card to his laptop. His editing software opened, and he began scrolling through the files. What he found made him forget about his planned video entirely. The first photo showed an elderly woman sharing her umbrella with a young homeless man sitting against a building. The composition was beautiful, the rain-slicked streets reflecting streetlights, the woman's hand gently touching the man's shoulder. Jake clicked to the next image. A group of teenagers helping an elderly man carry groceries up apartment steps, all of them laughing. Then another, a young mother sharing her sandwich with a hungry-looking stranger on a subway platform. And another, a construction worker stopping traffic so a family of ducks could cross the road. Jake's eyes widened as he scrolled faster, photo after photo revealing themselves. Each one captured a moment of human kindness, compassion or connection. But what made them extraordinary wasn't just the subject matter, it was how they were composed, the way light fell on faces, the genuine emotions captured in each frame. And in many of the photos, there was another element. The photographer himself appeared, always in the frame with the people he'd captured. An older black man with kind eyes and a gentle smile, his arm around strangers who looked at him with warmth and gratitude. Jake spent the next 3 hours going through every single image. There were 847 photos in total, spanning what appeared to be years of work. Each one told a story of small beautiful moments that most people never noticed, the fabric of kindness that held communities together. His hands were shaking when he finally finished. He sat back in his chair, overwhelmed. "This is incredible," he whispered to his empty apartment. "This is someone's entire life's work just thrown away." Jake looked at the damaged camera sitting on his desk. Someone had lost this, or it had been stolen, or abandoned. But whoever had taken these photos deserved to have them seen. This wasn't just photography, it was documentation of the human spirit. He made a decision. Jake worked through the entire night, barely stopping to eat. He selected 50 of the most powerful images and began crafting them into a video. His usual vlogging style gave way to something more thoughtful, more reverent. He used soft piano music, a royalty-free track that reminded him of those emotional Pixar movies his mom used to cry at. He let each photo linger on screen, giving viewers time to really see what was captured, the details, the emotions, the stories within stories. And he wrote a narration that came from his heart. "I found this camera 3 days ago in a pile of trash in Brownsville, Brooklyn. I don't know who it belongs to, but I know this: whoever took these photos spent years documenting something the world desperately needs to see. Not violence, not drama, not the things that usually go viral, but kindness, simple, everyday, human kindness." He showed photo after photo, his voice quiet and sincere over the music. "This man, I don't know his name." He captured hundreds of moments like this. People sharing food with strangers, kids helping elderly folks cross the street, neighbors looking out for each other. And in so many of these photos, he's there too, standing with them, becoming part of their story. Jake's editing skills had never been sharper. He zoomed in on faces, on hands touching in comfort, on smiles of genuine connection. He let the images speak for themselves, his narration sparse but impactful. We live in a world that constantly tells us humans are terrible to each other, that we're divided, angry, cruel, but this camera tells a different story. This camera captured proof, hundreds of pieces of evidence, that kindness is alive, that people still care, that we're not as lost as we think we are. The video climaxed with a montage of the photos showing the photographer himself, the older man, with the kind eyes, always smiling, always present in these moments of human goodness. If anyone knows this man, please help me find him. These photos need to get back to him. This story, his story, deserves to be told, because somewhere in New York City, there's a man who spent years capturing light and darkness, and he needs to know his work matters. Jake uploaded the video at 3:47 a.m., titled it "The Man Who Captured Kindness," and collapsed into bed, exhausted but energized by what he'd created. He woke up 6 hours later to his phone exploding with notifications. The video had 400,000 views, by noon it had 1.2 million, by evening it had crossed 5 million, and was trending #2 on YouTube. The comments section was flooded. "I'm crying at my desk at work. This is the most beautiful thing I've seen in years. Faith in humanity =restored. Oh, is this man? My grandmother does stuff like this in our neighborhood. This made me think of her. I'm calling her right now. I know this guy. He helped my uncle last year when he fell. We live in Brownsville." News outlets picked up the story. Local Brooklyn news stations ran segments. CBS This Morning featured it. The video went international, translated and shared across languages and borders. Twitter erupted with #find the kindness photographer. Facebook groups formed dedicated to identifying the man in the photos. TikTok users created emotional reaction videos, many crying as they watched. Jake's subscriber count exploded. 200K, 300K, 500K, but he barely noticed. He was too busy reading through thousands of messages from people claiming to know the photographer or to have been helped by him. At St. Mary's Hospital in Brooklyn, Nurse Linda had worked a double shift and was looking forward to going home. She stopped by the nurse's station break room to microwave her dinner when she heard the TV playing. "Touching story going viral tonight," the news anchor was saying. A young content creator found a lost camera and discovered hundreds of photos documenting acts of kindness across Brooklyn. Linda glanced up at the screen, only half paying attention as she stirred her soup. Then she saw the photo. The man's face smiling gently at the camera, his arm around an elderly woman outside a bakery. Linda's spoon clattered into the sink. That was Eleanor Miller, and that was, "Oh my God," she whispered, her hand flying to her mouth. She ran to the TV, her soup forgotten, and watched with growing astonishment as more photos flashed across the screen. The man in the photos, that kind face, those gentle eyes, it was him. It was the patient in room 304, Harold Davis, the same man who had saved Eleanor Miller's life just days ago, the same man who had been asking about his lost camera, the grief evident in his voice every time someone had to tell him it hadn't been found. Linda's eyes filled with tears as she watched the video playing on the news broadcast, seeing Harold's life work displayed for the world to see. All those years of kindness, documented and now witnessed by millions. She grabbed her phone and called Dr. Alan Miller, her words tumbling out in a rush. "Dr. Miller, you need to turn on the news right now. Your mother's patient, Mr. Davis, his camera was found. And you're not going to believe this, but the whole world is looking for him." 15 minutes later, Dr. Alan Miller stood in room 304, his tablet in hand, his mother Eleanor in her wheelchair beside him. Harold was sitting up in bed, his ribs still tightly wrapped, working through his physical therapy exercises with a grimace of discomfort. "Mr. Davis," Dr. Miller said, his voice strange, thick with emotion Harold couldn't identify. "I need you to watch something." Harold looked up, confused. "Doctor, I'm not really in the mood for please," Eleanor added softly, reaching for his hand. "It's important." Something in their faces made Harold stop. Dr. Miller positioned the tablet so Harold could see it clearly and pressed play. Piano music filled the small hospital room. Then Harold's photos began appearing on screen. His photos, the ones from his camera, the camera he thought was gone forever. Harold's breath caught in his throat. There was Mrs. Ava and the teenage boy. There was the man sharing his umbrella. There were the children in the community garden. Years of his work, his mission, his way of honoring Margaret's belief in human goodness, all displayed with beautiful music and someone's voice narrating. This man, I don't know his name, spent years documenting something the world desperately needs to see. Harold's hands began to tremble. His eyes filled with tears that spilled down his cheeks as he watched his life's purpose played out on a screen, seen and valued by others in a way he had never imagined. When the video showed the photos of himself, standing with the people he'd helped, his arm around strangers who had become momentary friends, Harold made a sound that was half sob, half laugh. "Guess the world finally developed my film," he whispered. Eleanor was crying openly now, squeezing his hand. Dr. Miller had to wipe his own eyes. "Mr. Davis," Nurse Linda said from the doorway, where she'd been watching, "that video has been viewed over 6 million times. Everyone is looking for you. They want to know who you are. They want to thank you." Harold couldn't speak. He could only stare at the screen as his photos continued to play, each one a memory, a moment, a piece of his heart captured and now shared with the world. He had spent 15 years documenting kindness in quiet anonymity, never seeking recognition, never wanting praise. He had simply wanted to prove to himself and to Margaret's memory that goodness still existed. And now somehow, that quiet mission had become a roar heard around the world. The next 72 hours transformed Harold's life in ways he never could have imagined. It started with a trickle. A few people who recognized locations or faces in the photos and came to the hospital asking if Harold Davis was there. Nurse Linda, with Dr. Miller's permission, confirmed his identity to legitimate visitors while keeping his room number private for his safety and recovery. But word spread quickly. The trickle became a flood. Mrs. Ava from the corner grocery was the first. She arrived with the teenage boy from the photo, both carrying bags of fresh fruit and homemade dumplings. When she entered Harold's room and saw him sitting up in bed, she burst into tears. "Mr. Harold," she said in her accented English, rushing to his bedside. "We saw the picture. On the computer my grandson showed me. I never knew, all these years you take pictures of beautiful things in our neighborhood, and we never knew." The teenage boy, whose name was Marcus, stood awkwardly holding the bags. "You made me look like a hero, sir," he said quietly. "I was just helping her carry groceries, but the way you captured it, my mom saw it online and cried. She said she was proud of me." Harold reached for their hands, his own eyes wet. "You were a hero, Marcus. That's exactly what heroes do. They see someone who needs help and they act. No fanfare, no reward, just kindness." They stayed for an hour, Mrs. Ava fussing over him and insisting he eat her dumplings despite the hospital food already on his tray. When they left, 3 more people were waiting in the hallway. A middle-aged woman with 2 children came next. Harold didn't recognize her at first, but she explained tearfully that 5 years ago he had helped her when her car broke down in a snowstorm. She had been 8 months pregnant, terrified and alone, and Harold had not only helped her call for assistance, but had waited with her in the cold until help arrived, giving her his own coat. "I never forgot your face," she said. "Your kindness that night. It restored my faith when I needed it most. When I saw your photos online, I knew I had to come thank you properly." By evening, Harold's room was filled with flowers, cards and small gifts. The hospital staff had to bring in additional tables to hold everything. Each visitor brought a story, a memory of Harold's kindness, some captured in his photos, many that had never been documented at all. On the 3rd day after the video went viral, Jake Torres finally made the pilgrimage to St. Mary's Hospital. He was nervous, clutching Harold's damaged camera, which he'd carefully cleaned and protected. Nurse Linda escorted him to room 304, where he found Harold surrounded by people. Eleanor and Dr. Miller were there, along with several other visitors sharing stories and laughter. When Jake entered, conversation stopped. Harold looked up, and their eyes met. "Are you?" Harold began. "Jake Torres, sir," Jake said quickly, stepping forward. "I'm the one who found your camera. I'm the one who made the video." He held out the camera, his hands shaking slightly. "I'm so sorry for using your photos without asking first. I should have tried harder to find you before posting them. But when I saw what you'd captured, I just felt like the world needed to see it." Harold took the camera gently, as if greeting an old friend. He turned it over in his hands, examining the damage, the cracked lens, the dented corner, but holding it with profound tenderness. "You didn't take them, son. Harold said softly, looking up at Jake with those kind eyes that had become famous across the internet. You shared them. That's what I always wanted in my heart, I just didn't know it until now. Jake's shoulders sagged with relief. Your work is incredible, Mr. Davis. Those photos, they've touched millions of people, changed people. I've gotten thousands of messages from viewers saying they're inspired to be kinder, to notice the good around them, to help others. Harold smiled, that gentle smile captured in so many of his self-portraits. Then Margaret was right all along. She always said kindness was contagious, that one good act could ripple outward forever. I was just trying to document the ripples. I never thought I'd cause new ones. Eleanor Miller spoke up from her wheelchair, her voice strong despite her recent ordeal. Mr. Davis, you saved my life. But through these photos, you've touched thousands of lives. That's a legacy beyond measure. Dr. Alan Miller nodded, standing beside his mother. Mr. Davis, I've been thinking about what you said about your stories living in that camera. I want to propose something. He paused, choosing his words carefully. What if we created a permanent exhibition of your photographs here at St. Mary? A gallery wall that patients, visitors and staff could see every day, a reminder of the goodness in humanity when they need it most. Harold's breath caught. Doctor, I don't know what to say. Say yes, Eleanor urged, squeezing his hand. Let your light shine, Harold. You've spent years capturing it in others. It's time people see the light in you. Around the room, heads nodded in agreement. Jake pulled out his phone, showing Harold the numbers. The video now had over 12 million views, and the hashtag #TheKindnessPhotographer had been used over 200,000 times, with people sharing their own acts of kindness, inspired by Harold's work. You've started a movement, Mr. Davis, Jake said. People are competing to do good deeds, to capture moments of kindness, to be the change they want to see. All because you spent 15 years quietly documenting love in action. Harold looked around the room at all these faces, some familiar from his photos, others new but connected to him, through that invisible web of kindness that had always existed, but was now visible to the world. His camera sat in his lap, beaten, but not broken, just like him. Margaret, he whispered to himself, did you know, when you gave me this camera, did you know it would lead here? As if in answer, sunlight broke through the hospital window, falling across his hands where they rested on the camera. Golden hour light, the same light he'd spent years chasing through Brooklyn's streets. Nurse Linda appeared in the doorway with a huge smile. Mr. Davis, Channel 7 News is here requesting an interview, and you might want to sit down for this, but you already are, the mayor's office called. They want to honor you with a commendation. Harold laughed, a sound of pure disbelief and joy. I think, he said, looking around at all these people whose lives had intersected with his in ways he'd never imagined, I think I need to start a new project. Because this, all of this, needs to be documented too. Jake grinned. I'll teach you Instagram, Mr. Davis. Your story's not over, it's just beginning. 1 year later, Harold Davis passed away peacefully in his sleep at the age of 63. His heart, which had given so much to others, simply grew tired, but by then, his legacy had taken root in ways that would outlive him by generations. The funeral at St. Augustine's Church in Brooklyn was standing room only. People from all 5 boroughs came, those he'd photographed, those he'd helped, those who'd only known him through Jake's video but felt connected to his spirit of kindness. Eleanor Miller, now 82 and stronger than she'd been in years, delivered a eulogy with her son Alan supporting her. Harold saved my life, twice, she said, her voice clear and steady. Once with his hands on that sidewalk, performing CPR, when my heart stopped. And again with his camera, reminding me and millions of others why life is worth living, because of moments of connection, compassion, and love. The ceremony was beautiful, but it was what came after that truly honored Harold's memory. The city of New York, in cooperation with Dr. Alan Miller and St. Mary's Hospital, established the Harold Davis Foundation. Its mission to provide support for isolated patients, fund photography programs for underprivileged youth, and offer assistance to homeless individuals, the 3 groups Harold had spent his life documenting and serving quietly. Jake Torres, whose channel had grown to over 2 million subscribers, became the foundation's media director, using his platform to continue Harold's work of capturing and sharing moments of human goodness. The permanent exhibition at St. Mary's Hospital became a pilgrimage site. The Kindness Gallery, as it was known, displayed 50 of Harold's most powerful photographs, along with the stories behind them. Patients would visit the gallery during their recovery, finding hope in the faces of strangers, showing compassion to other strangers. But perhaps the most touching memorial came from an unexpected source. Marcus, the teenage boy from one of Harold's first viral photos, had been inspired by Harold's work to pursue photography himself. Now 18 and accepted to NYU's photography program on a full scholarship funded by the Harold Davis Foundation, Marcus proposed a special project. He would recreate Harold's final photograph. On a crisp autumn morning, exactly 1 year after Harold's passing, a gathering assembled at the St. Mary's Hospital Gallery. The mayor was there along with Eleanor Miller, Dr. Alan Miller, Jake Torres, Nurse Linda, and dozens of others whose lives Harold had touched. Jake had worked with the foundation to commission something special, a large-scale print of Harold's final photograph, the one he'd taken in those last moments before the accident. It was the image of Eleanor Miller being loaded into the ambulance, Harold's hand reaching toward her, golden hour light illuminating both their faces in a moment of life preserved. But beside it, they hung something else, an empty frame. Marcus stepped forward to explain, his voice steady despite his emotion. Mr. Harold taught us through his pictures that kindness doesn't end. It's not a finite resource. Every act of compassion creates space for another. Marcus continued, his young voice carrying through the gallery. This empty frame, it's not really empty, it's waiting for the next moment of kindness, the next person who chooses to help a stranger, the next time someone sees another human being and decides to care. He paused, looking around at the faces gathered, a community bound together by one man's quiet belief in human goodness. Mr. Harold showed us that we don't take photos to remember faces, we take them to remember kindness. And kindness doesn't need a camera to exist, it just needs us to choose it, every single day. Eleanor Miller wheeled herself forward, her hand trembling as she reached up to touch the empty frame. Harold once told me that his camera captured light in darkness, she said softly. But he was wrong about one thing, he was the light, his camera was just the proof. Dr. Alan Miller placed his hand on his mother's shoulder, his own eyes wet. Over the past year, he had transformed St. Mary's approach to patient care, implementing programs focused on human connection and compassion, all inspired by Harold's photographs. The Harold Davis Foundation has already helped over 300 individuals, Dr. Miller announced to the gathering. We've funded 12 photography programs in underserved schools. We've provided assistance to 47 homeless individuals, helping them find housing and support. And we've brought comfort to countless hospital patients through the gallery you see around you. He gestured to the photographs lining the walls, ordinary people in extraordinary moments of compassion. But numbers don't capture what Harold really gave us. He gave us permission to believe again, permission to see goodness when the world tells us to be cynical, permission to be kind without expecting anything in return. Jake Torres stepped forward, his phone in hand, not to record but to share. I want to show you all something, he said. After that first video went viral, I asked viewers to share their own acts of kindness using #LensOfHumanity. In the past year, that hashtag has been used 1.7 million times. He scrolled through his phone, showing image after image, people helping elderly neighbors, strangers paying for someone's groceries, teenagers cleaning up parks, workers building wheelchair ramps, teachers staying late to help struggling students, communities coming together after disasters. Every single one of these posts references Mr. Davis's work as their inspiration. His 15 years of quiet documentation have sparked a global movement. People in Japan, Brazil, Kenya, Australia, all over the world, are capturing and sharing kindness because one man in Brooklyn showed them it was worth noticing. Jake's voice cracked with emotion. He never wanted fame, he just wanted to prove kindness existed, and in doing so, he made it multiply. The room fell silent, except for quiet sniffles and the sound of people wiping their eyes. Eleanor Miller's voice, though soft, carried a fierce conviction. Harold gave me more than my life back that day. He gave me purpose. Every day since I've asked myself, what would Harold photograph today? What moment of kindness can I create that would be worthy of his lens? She looked directly at the young people gathered, Marcus, Jake, and dozens of teenagers from the photography programs funded by the foundation. You are his legacy, she told them. Not just these photographs on the walls, you going out into the world with eyes open to goodness, with hearts ready to serve, with the courage to believe that one person's kindness can change everything. Dr. Miller unveiled a final element of the memorial, a bronze plaque beneath the empty frame, with Harold's own words, the ones Jake had heard him say in the hospital room. We don't take photos to remember faces, we take them to remember kindness. Harold Davis, 1963 to 2025, and beneath that, an addition, every frame is empty until we fill it with compassion. Every moment is ordinary until we make it extraordinary through love. The camera may be silent, but kindness always speaks. As evening fell and the gathering finally dispersed, a single figure remained in the gallery. Eleanor Miller sat in her wheelchair before the photographs, her son having stepped away to make a phone call. She studied each image slowly, remembering the man who had created them. In the quiet of the empty gallery, she spoke aloud, as if Harold could hear her. You told me I had many more heartbeats ahead of me, Harold. You were right, and I promise you, I promise, every one of those heartbeats will be spent honoring what you taught us. That kindness is never wasted, that noticing matters, that one person really can change the world. She reached up and touched the photograph of herself and Harold, that final image of two strangers bound together by a moment of crisis and compassion. Thank you, she whispered, for saving an old woman's last heartbeat, and for teaching us all how to live the ones we have left. The gallery lights began to dim automatically as evening turned to night, but Eleanor didn't move. She sat there in the growing darkness, surrounded by Harold's photographs, surrounded by light, captured and preserved, moments of human goodness frozen in time and space. And in that darkness, the photographs seemed to glow with their own illumination, as if Harold's belief in the light of human kindness had been so strong that it had infused itself into every image he'd ever taken. The empty frame hung on the wall, Sophia's crayon drawing visible in the dimming light. It showed a stick figure man with a camera and a smile, surrounded by hearts and other stick figures holding hands. At the bottom, in a child's careful handwriting, were the words, "Thank you for showing us the light."